Hello everyone, and welcome to this video today on formatting a works cited list in MLA style. I am Ashley Squires, the director of the Writing Center here at Avila, and I'm going to be your guide for today. So just in case this is the first video you're watching in this series, let's quickly review the reasons why it's important to cite your sources. So first of all, and this is probably the one you have heard, citing sources gives credit to people for their original ideas and words. So when you cite a source, you're acknowledging that the ideas came from somewhere else and are the intellectual property of their original author. Secondly, perhaps less well known, citing sources helps your reader understand where your information is coming from. So if a reader is interested in following up on an example you provide or knowing more about where a fact comes from, showing the source allows them to go and find it themselves. And finally, citing sources enhances your credibility as a writer. It shows that you have done your research and that you're in conversation with what other people have written about your topic. So what do we need in order to cite a source? Generally, you need to do three things. First of all, you need to provide quotation marks anytime you're quoting from another source directly. You need to provide an in-text or a parenthetical citation. The two terms are interchangeable, in-text or parenthetical. Anytime you quote, paraphrase, or discuss a source in your writing. And then finally, you need to provide a complete list of works cited at the end of your paper. So in a previous video, we covered in-text citations or parenthetical citations, and now I'm going to talk about item number 3, the works cited page. So one quick thing that you should probably know before we get into this is that there are lots and lots of different citation systems out there. So at some point you might have been reading a book and noticed that it had footnotes, and if it has footnotes, it likely follows the Chicago Manual of Style. You might have taken a psychology class and your instructor asked you to use APA style. So all of these different citation standards, all of these different systems are actually provided by different publishers and different academic organizations. So for example, the Chicago University Press publishes the Chicago Manual of Style, the Modern Languages Association puts out the MLA handbook, and the American Psychological Association puts out the APA manual. So which citation system a professional is going to use depends really on where they're publishing. Different journals want different styles, but certain formats tend to dominate within certain disciplines. So APA is the most common one for the social sciences. So if you're taking a psychology or an economics class, then you will probably be required to use APA if you're writing a paper. Whereas Chicago and MLA are most common in the humanities, which is why MLA tends to come up a lot in English classes. So for you as a student, which format you pick really depends on what your instructor or your program wants. If they haven't said which one they want, then MLA is not a bad one to go with, because especially its in-text citation system tends to be a little bit easier to manage than the other two. But that's just kind of my opinion. So, so that we can look at how to format a works cited page, I am actually going to switch over here to Google Docs. This is part of an MLA template that I created and which is linked on the handouts page of the Writing Center website. And I'll also provide a link to this in the description of the video on YouTube. So this is an MLA template that you can use to format any paper that you have to write in MLA style. It will help you get the paragraph formatting right, the spacing right, block quotes, etc., and gives you some examples of how to do the different citations. So if we scroll down here to the works cited, we can kind of talk about some basic rules for how these things are supposed to be formatted. First of all, a works cited list is exactly what it sounds like. It is a comprehensive list of all the sources that you have used while writing your paper. Even if you only used one, you still have to include a works cited page. What may not be so obvious is the reason why it's here and like why you have to do this even if you only have one source, and what relationship this works cited list has to your in-text citations. So some students don't quite understand why it is we have to do both. So I'm going to explain why. So remember back when I talked about why we cite sources, and I said that the second big reason is so that your reader can follow up on what you've done. So they could go and track down your sources if they wanted to use them. Well, in order for your reader to be able to do that, they need several pieces of information. They need like the title of the article, the journal it was published in, the pages in the journal that the article appears on, the year it was published. They need lots of different pieces of information. If we were to put all of that information into the text every time we cited a source, that text would start looking pretty ugly, and it would just be full of redundant information because it would be necessary to like repeat all of that every time you cited a particular source. So the parenthetical citation is designed to give the reader just enough information that they could go look up the full reference at the end of the paper. It's kind of like the same reason why we don't just drop long URLs into the middle of a web page, because it just looks really ugly to have all of that text, which sometimes goes on for multiple lines just in the middle of an article. Instead, we use hyperlinks, and the hyperlink just gives us something short that we can click that will take us to the full piece of information, that will take us to the original source. You can kind of think of the relationship between parenthetical citations and the works cited as like an analog version of a hyperlink in an online article. It's just giving you a little bit of information that takes you to the big bit of information. And if you're wondering why we don't just put like URLs or links in the middle of this kind of thing, it's, well, first of all, kind of an academic essay is originally an analog format. We're assuming that maybe somebody will print this out and read it that way, and so won't be able to use links. And also because, again, URLs are kind of ugly. So this is how we do it when writing academic papers. We kind of assume a reader who might be reading it on paper and for whom a link wouldn't work. And so we do our little analog links with parenthetical citations that point towards the full works cited entry. Okay, so like I said, in order for a works cited entry to be really useful to a reader, it needs to contain lots of information. And in order for it to be readable, we want that information to appear in a very predictable way. That's why we need a system like MLA style or like APA style. Because if everybody was just out there kind of doing their own thing, then it would be pretty difficult to decipher a typical references list. The idea behind these systems is that I should be able to go to a journal or to a book that uses MLA style, and when I'm looking for references, I will know where to look, and I will know what to expect when I am looking at them. Okay, I'll know generally that I should be seeing everything with the last name of the author first, for example, and that the page numbers will appear somewhere at the end if there's page numbers that need to be included. I need to know what to expect when I'm looking at these things. And so that's why there's a system. That's why there's all these little rules that we have to follow. If that feels overwhelming, let me just say you can relax a little bit. I'm going to give you just 3 basic rules for how a works cited page should be formatted in general, and then explain that for the rest, you don't have to memorize anything. You could just keep some kind of reference pages handy, and that will help you with the rest. But here's 3 basic rules for what you have to do with a works cited page. Okay, first of all, the works cited page is alphabetized. Okay, in MLA, we always alphabetize the entries by the last name of the first author. And that is regardless of what order the sources are used in the paper, okay? Always by the last name of the first author. It's not by like which source you used first or anything like that. Because we use alphabetization, it is not necessary to include any numbers or bullet points with these entries, okay? If you use a citation generator like Grammarly, and let me just say right off the bat, these are fine to use. If you like using them, you should continue to do so if you find them useful. But sometimes they will add like numbers to your list, and all the numbers really mean is like this is the order that you entered these sources into the citation generator tool. It doesn't really mean anything other than that, and it's not really proper MLA style to have numbers. And so anytime you get a list spit back to you from one of these tools, just go ahead and delete the numbers or delete the bullet points. Definitely don't add them on your own. It should just look like this: no numbers, no bullets. Okay, so that's rule number 2. First rule, alphabetize your entries. Second rule, don't include numbers. And finally, here's the third rule. So the third rule has to do with the spacing. Instead of bullets, what we're using here is called a hanging indent, so that it's easy to see where one entry ends and the next one begins. So you're probably familiar with indentation already. That's what we call it when we set off one line of the text or multiple lines of the text a little bit further from the margin than the rest of the text. So when you tab over at the beginning of a paragraph, that's called an indentation. Works cited entries use the opposite form of indentation from a typical paragraph. So a typical paragraph, it's just the first line that's half an inch from the left margin. In MLA format, it is the first line of the entry that is flush with the left margin, and all the subsequent lines are a half an inch away, half an inch from the original line. So let me show you how to do this in Google Docs. There are ways to automate this in just about any word processing software that you happen to be using. It's easy to look up the instructions if you need to, but I can just show you how to do it in Google Docs right here. So if you go up to your menu at the top and go to Format, go over here to Align and Indent, and go to Indentation Options. So here you get several options. What these would do is they would allow you to bump the indent over a certain amount of space on the right or left for all of your lines. But down here under Special Indent, you have the option to indent the first line as you would for a normal paragraph, and to create a hanging indent. So let's see what it would look like with no hanging indent. Let's change it to none. Okay, so that's what it would look like without the hanging indent. Now to create the hanging indent, again, I go to Align and Indent menu. I go to Indentation Options, Special Indent, Hanging, and then if it's not already set to 0.5 inches as a default, go ahead and set that and hit Apply, and voila, all of your entries have a hanging indent. So that way you don't have to do hard returns and tabs and all of that stuff. It's just automatically formats every single entry. Okay, so those are the 3 basic rules of formatting. But then there is formatting these references themselves. And this is where things can feel a little bit overwhelming, because every single different type of source, whether it's a book or an electronic journal or a documentary or a social media post, has its own citation format, its own rules about the order that information is supposed to appear in and where all these little punctuation marks go. And that means that like the list of possibilities is absolutely huge, which is why these manuals are published as books. So what are you as a student supposed to do? Well, first of all, I recommend that you just relax a little bit, because nobody memorizes all of this stuff. Everything that you could possibly want to know about formatting references in MLA is Googleable. There was a day back when I was a college student when you had to have that MLA manual out on your desk to figure this stuff out. But now you can just Google for it. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint here. Okay, now you can just Google for whatever exotic type of entry you want to find, whether it's how to cite a documentary, how to cite a TikTok, how to cite a podcast. It's easy to find. You will get hundreds of thousands of results for any of these. That also means it's not necessary to email your instructor about it, because I guarantee they have to look this stuff up too. Okay. Some recommendations I have: go ahead and bookmark the official MLA website and the Purdue OWL, which is kind of a big comprehensive resource on everything you need to know about MLA citation style. There are, of course, like I said, free citation generators out there. It's fine to use them. Do be aware that they have quirks. These are free tools. Sometimes you get what you pay for. They don't necessarily alphabetize your entries. Sometimes they put numbers on them. Just be prepared to go in and fix stuff like that. And finally, while there are definitely hundreds, or even thousands of possible formats out there, there are really like 5 that you're going to use the vast majority of the time, like a book chapter, a journal, a news article, a website without an author, etc. So what we in the Writing Center have done is we've put them into this quick reference sheet, so that you can just print it out and tape it to your wall or keep it, open in your browser. However it is, it's best for you working. Um, I'm going to link this handout in the YouTube description, but you can also find it by just going directly to the Writing Center page on the Avila website. And then when you need one of these more exotic reference types, just Google for it. Like I said, don't email your teacher to ask this sort of question. Just cut out the middleman, save yourself some time waiting for them to answer. Just Google it, okay? So here's my very last recommendation. You can save yourself a little bit of stress if you don't wait until the very end of the project to do the references or to do the Works Cited page. My recommendation is to just kind of populate it as you go. Once you find a source you want to use in your paper, scroll down to the last page of your draft, type out the fully formatted Works Cited entry. This really will save you a lot of headaches, because there have been times when I was writing and used a source and even dropped in an in-text reference, and then I forgot to go back and do the full Works Cited entry, came back a few days later, couldn't remember where I got the article, what database it came from. It's a big hassle. Save yourself the time, save yourself the stress. Keep a running list of your references as you go. And as a side note, there are citation management systems out there that can keep this running list for you as you do your research. They can be really nice. Stuff like EndNote or Zotero. I know a lot of people who like them. In my experience, they tend to be better for long-term research projects. So like your final thesis or maybe a term paper. If it's a course paper that just needs like 3 to 5 sources, then it may not actually really save you any time, and you might just be better off keeping this running list manually, but they're available out there, and many people do find them useful. So this brings us to the end of our video. I recognize that MLA citation can feel a little bit overwhelming, so if you ever want to talk about it, or just have someone check that you're doing your work cited correctly, feel free to drop by or make an appointment with the Writing Center, and we will be happy to help. Thank you for watching.